a world that is free of all forms of malnutrition. That's where we envision and where all the players work together to achieve that. So my name is Katia Santos Dias. I'm the country director for GAIN Mozambique. I'm a nutritionist and a food engineer, and I lead the team, the project team where the SBN team is in. Nutrition is not just a health sector concern, and nutrition needs to get out of the health sector alone. And private sector represents and should play a vital role in nutrition. But their motivation is quite different. You have the food producers, non-food producers that are service providers. Some of the times it's also understanding how can they link their business with nutrition. But you also have a lot of companies looking about what can they do with their CSR, especially non-food. How can they support the government in their policies? And you also have the companies that want to understand if there's business in the nutrition policies in country. I think access to information is a very important one. Information is, it's a commodity. Having access to information, even if there's a new law, if it is where's the source of funding, if it is how can we interact with the consumer, all information is a rare commodity, and I think private sector is always looking for that information. You have the companies that will contribute by producing more nutritious foods, by allowing consumers to access more nutritious but affordable products, influence their communities and interact with their communities, provide some nutrition education. You will have the companies that will support the national policies and the national programs like school feeding. There won't be one single outcome of the private sector involvement. I think it is a very broader context, and I think we also need to understand that business itself, as a diffuse model of operating, is not limited to a certain area. When you are a food producer, you don't know where your product is going to be and who is going to be consuming your product. What you know is that you will know some metrics, and this is also where we will need to link the metrics that private sector uses with our own public sector, public health metrics. How do we translate one thing to another? That's where SBN should be concentrated. Let me give you some examples. SBN has been able to broker some businesses between private sector companies. Like one company needs a service provider for food safety and quality, so we've been able to match them. SBN has also been able to provide technical support for some companies. We had a producer of maheu in country, and they approached us to say, we are producing this maize drink, how can we make it more nutritious? And so then what we did was provide technical support, and now they are fortifying with vitamin B complex. So these are just few examples. An ongoing conversation is also to construct the nutrition jargon to private sector. Each time we talk about nutrition, private sector is always like thinking about very complicated interventions, and we need to deconstruct that and need to really talk about what is important, nutritious products, services, and being a responsible producer, but also being responsible with their workforce and being responsible with their communities. And I think these are the three big strains of work that I see for private sector at the moment. SBN for me, it's a facilitator in the country, and will facilitate the conversation between private sector, public sector, development actors, and will also facilitate the access of information for private sector. It's not supposed to implement a lot of projects. It's supposed to connect all the stakeholders. In Mozambique, SBN is also focusing on the access to finance. not to the funds. It's a different approach. So one of the services that SBN aims and aspires to do is to connect the needs of the private sector in terms of investment in nutrition and to connect it to the sources, but not really being the source of that investment. It might be, but it will also connect. You have a company, you need growth capital, so we will tell you this is what is available in the market, and we will try to connect it with that sources, and maybe even help you to access that financing. One of the big lessons for me was the governance structure, that we still haven't finalized it, that there was a lot of push from the other platforms to be sitting inside that special civil society. And it took us sometimes to reach a consensus that private sector is not sitting in the other platforms. So the other platforms shouldn't be sitting inside the private sector. And I think one of the lessons that we need to learn is how to ignite the true movement that should be within the private sector. We should only be, as development partners, we should be like the co-pilots and they should be the pilot, which means that there will be a transition period where we are the pilots, but they need to be co-pilots. And then we need them to switch, and then as development partners, maybe we can maintain the platform working, we can facilitate information, we can facilitate some services, but the movement needs really to be rallied inside the private sector. Our next plans is to maintain the network active, to engage more and more with the private sector and with sectors, and to develop offerings to those sectors. At the moment, we are doing a consumer research about nutritious products that will be a tool to understand how can private sector foster and develop solutions so that people can afford and will consume more nutritious products. But we, as true nutrition experts, we also looked not only what private sector needs, but what are the gaps in terms of a dietary diversity in Mozambique, and that's where we would like to support private sector.